Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Badge Chat. This is traditionally our Badge Chat show and tell. Today, this afternoon, is going to be a little bit of a departure from the norm because we've had a little bit of a mix-up, and our guests who we were slated to interview are not going to be able to make it. So, rather than just cancel and bail last minute on y'all, I decided to go ahead and still go live, and we're going to call this an Ask Me Anything session on digital badges. And if nobody shows up, I'll just turn it off after a few minutes. If folks do and want to show up and ask some questions, you can tweet them out at hashtag BadgeChat, and we'll answer them live on the air for you so that we can make sure that we value the time that you've invested in this experience with us and just taking the time to join today. For me personally, I just got back from ACTFL, the American Council on Teaching Foreign Languages conference. This is the largest conference of language teachers in the United States. I think probably about 8,000 teachers were there, and some really neat stuff happening in the world of languages, and pretty excited to find out about and be involved in some cool projects badging in the world languages space, both professional development as well as students. There's some really neat stuff coming down the pipeline on that front. And, something that I've really just been thinking about a lot lately is since we had the conversation with Doug Belshaw earlier last month about just some of the work happening in the UK versus what he perceives as happening here in the United States. And, one of the big things that I keep running into that I see here in the United States is a lot of people who are jumping the gun, I think, on the order of operations and skipping the why, that they're going straight to what platform do we need. And for those of you who are just joining, by the way, I saw a few more people just came in. My name is Noah Geisel, and Badge Chat today is not going to be our typical interview. They were unable to make it, so we're going to transform this into an Ask Me Anything session. So if you have something that you've been wondering about badges, go ahead and tweet it out on hashtag BadgeChat, and I'll be watching that hashtag. And if I can answer it, I will do my best. If I can't, I will, at least own it live on air and embarrass myself and maybe hopefully be able to point you in the right direction. So as I was saying, if you one of the things that I keep getting that I think is a question that a lot of folks are not starting with it is the why. That there a lot of people are calling me up to learn about badges, and the very first question they're asking is, well, what platform do we need? And I think that a lot of times is a big mistake, because I think that it really leads to decisions that oftentimes can be really expensive decisions that get made based on information that's kind of not complete, if you will, that folks are making really expensive decisions for users without first identifying what users' needs are, right? And so before going out and asking what is the best platform, I think a really more valuable strategy for you, for your users, and ultimately, if you're not going with a free system for your learning system's dollars, is to be wondering, what do our users need? And so one of the things that we start with in Aurora is functional requirements list. And so just asking out loud, what do our users need? And what do anybody who's in our ecosystem need from a platform from which we're going to be issuing digital badges? And so, by asking questions like that on the front end, you can come up with this giant list of needs. Like, do you want to have the ability for multiple users to issue the same badge? Not all systems are going to be able to do that for you. Do you want to have the ability to attach evidence, to require that evidence is attached, to have badges turn on to be open, turn off to not be open badges? But there are all these different considerations that go into these functional requirements that a lot of folks just don't consider before going ahead and investing in a bad system. And the danger of that, of course, is that you go ahead and invest all these dollars. You sign a contract, maybe it's 3-5 years long, and you don't have the same bargaining power, do you, after you've signed a contract, right? Before you go and work with that vendor, you're in a much stronger position from which to say, here's our list of functional requirements. Which of those can you meet? And of the ones you can't, which of those are you willing to commit to meeting? And what kind of timeline are we looking at for you to get those in the queue? And I think you're probably going to be in just a less advantageous position if you've already written the check than if you do it beforehand. For the folks who just joined us, I apologize that our interview is not happening this week. I'm not sure quite why, but I'll probably take ownership of it and say that I must have miscommunicated something. So rather than cancel the interview and just do nothing, I'm available to do a badge chat, ask me anything session, if you will. So if there's anything that you've been wondering that's on your mind about digital badge credentials, and you think I might be able to answer it, just tweet it to me at hashtag badge chat. I'm refreshing the hashtag every few seconds, and if I see a question come in, I'll answer it live on the air. And if not, I'm just going to riff on things that I've been really thinking about, either until the top of the hour or until there's nobody left in the room. But thank you for joining us. We definitely value you for taking the opportunity to and your time to join this afternoon to learn and share around digital badge credentials. So that's one thing that's been fresh on my mind a lot is I was saying around the jumping straight into a vendor without really investigating what our users need and figuring out functional requirements that we can put in front of users. Another thing that I've been thinking a lot about is communication planning. We are talking about something that is still pretty conceptually abstract for a lot of people, right? That there's some folks still out there for whom, digital badges, they hear the word badge, and that's really the only background knowledge on which they can lean. And so they're bringing that into the fold, and there's going to be some assumptions that might be made, and that's going to lead to communication difficulties. For other folks who maybe have at least heard of digital badges, maybe they've even seen or earned a digital badge, there still might be a bit of a kind of meaning-making gap between what you're saying and what they're hearing, depending on what they've seen so far. And so I think that what that really speaks to is a need for those of us who are on the implementation side and the design side of digital badge systems and ecosystems is to be really intentional around the development of a communication plan. And I think part of that is external, and I think a big part of that I've been thinking about at least is an internal plan. And so what do I mean by that? What I mean is that if we are developing a system that's for students, then how are we communicating to teachers what it is that we're even doing? How are we making sure that they're aware of it? And what kind of toolkits are we making available to them in order to support their learning and growth as they go down this journey with us? Because there's just so many things that we can do that if we upset one of those teachers, if we fail to meet their expectations, if we fail to meet their needs, they're going to the teacher's lounge and they're saying, this isn't ready for showtime. This is amateur hour. This breaks all the time. This doesn't do what we want it to do. And next thing you know, they're really, just the well is just very toxic, right? Nobody's going to drink the water because your earliest users are talking trash on it instead of saying, y'all, this is amazing what we're doing for kids in our district now. Check it out. Or for other teachers through professional development badging. And so, things that can go into the communication plan are, how often we're going to contact them with what kind of messaging, do we find, if we use a tool like a MailChimp or one of these other newsletter apps or services, we are going to, for a few extra bucks, be able to get data like knowing what's our click rate. Are people actually opening our emails? For how long are they reading? If we're, beyond emails, there's also just stuff around getting feedback and continuous improvement around professional development in those communications, whether it's email or not, but going to our users and saying, what worked about this? Something that a lesson that I learned very early on was, we were throwing way too much information out in very early trainings with teachers. And so instead of, in an effort to make sure that we were answering all their questions, making this process crystal clear, we actually were just overwhelming users and making them, leave an initial training with a sense that this is a much bigger undertaking than it actually was. And so, what we found is people weren't leaving and going into their classrooms and creating access and opportunities for students by issuing digital badge credentials. They were, thinking, I'll get to this when I have time. And let's be honest, like, teachers don't have time. And so as a result, we started scaling back and saying, okay, let's kind of strip down the messaging here in these trainings to the bare bones and make sure that what we're telling them is a little less overwhelming. And, then we check in with users, and lo and behold, we're in a train just a few weeks ago where maybe some of the messaging was too sparse and they had so many questions. And so it's this huge balance and undertaking to find out and how we course correct. And again, just like with the functional requirements, it's going to our users. It's this real service kind of leadership mentality, I think, of being humble and staying curious and knowing that even answers we think we have are probably not the best answers that we eventually will have. And so, it's only by being curious, it's only by needling our users and saying, what sucks about this? How can we make it better? How is this working for you? That we get to unearth those. You may kind of sense here, I'm a fast talker. And so, we were in another train just, I think it was last week, where, we thought it was a very step-by-step, easy thing where these teachers had done this amazing project. They knew ahead of time you're going to come to this training where you're going to be able to badge some students who did this project for the work they did, to credential the skills that they demonstrated. And so they already knew that that was going to be happening. We had it laid out step by step on a handout in a slide deck that they had access to. And, the thinking was, let's, kind of breeze through the slide deck and then, go straight into the doing part. And then, we can just be floating from table to table helping teachers. And that worked for some people. And at the same time, we had at the very start of training, a teacher who felt that the presenter was going too quickly. And she literally threw her pencil up in the air. She slammed down on her fist on the table and she shut her computer. And, she was just done with it. And luckily, we had an opportunity once the presentation ended to sit down with her one-on-one, not myself, but one of my colleagues. And, we're able to just kind of slow walk it. And lo and behold, not only does she leave there smiling, but she leaves there saying, you know what, I think we're doing something this next week in this unit. Like, it looks like this skill, is that something that I can badge even though you guys didn't already set it up for us? Yes, amazing. And so, that doesn't happen a lot, I don't think, in professional development. A lot of times, the person who's banging the table and bringing that negative attitude, that we get to a place of don't water the rocks, right? And I think it's way healthier, I think, to have positive assumptions about that individual, that they want to be involved, they want to do amazingness, and they just need maybe different phrasing, different types of invitations to bring that amazingness to the table. And so luckily we were able to not lose that person. For those of you who just joined, my name is Noah Geisel, and you may have noticed that I'm the only one in the room. We do not have an interview today, so I'm just kind of riffing on some stuff I've been thinking a lot about lately on digital badge credentials. And if you're watching live and want to toss a question out there on #BadgeChat, I will see your question. I'm refreshing the hashtag every few seconds, and I will respond to your question right here live on the air. If not, and you just want to continue to listen to me riff, I will do so. The other thing that I've been thinking about a lot, and really just for years now, but this is just in new ways lately, is the idea of access and equity, and how equity is not just a moving target, but a moving meaning in different contexts and different situations. And what do I mean by that? We've had a situation on one of my projects come up where on the value proposition side of these specific digital badge credentials, there's there's a group of users that said, you know what, the value proposition that is being made available to our learners is not what our learners need. We're already kind of doing that. We need something. This is a middle school user group, and they're saying we need something that looks more like what the high schools are getting. And otherwise we're not going to take part. And so, the team got together and said, is this an issue? Are we playing favorites here? Or, what's going to happen? And ultimately the decision was made, let's give them what they want in order to give them what they need. And that's the opportunity to credential these young people. And so the decision was made, let's go ahead and give them the high school opportunities to the middle school students. And, that decision is now being revisited because it's been brought up that, is this a equity concern that this is, one of our more privileged schools from which this request is coming, and that opportunity is not being given to other schools. And so are we, systemically creating, opportunities for inequity that just reinforce existing kind of systems that favor the haves over the have-nots. And it's really interesting to see the different ways that people are approaching this problem, or this design opportunity, if you will, because there's some people who are, it's very clear cut. Yeah, this is problematic that this group of users is getting special treatment that others aren't getting. And then there's another side that's saying, you know what, we don't know if that is the case, because what they're getting is what they need in order to take part. And if we start hearing from other user groups, similar user groups, that the value proposition doesn't work for them at the middle school, they need something that looks like the high school value proposition, we'll evaluate that. Maybe that makes sense for them as well. But the equity does not mean all folks getting equal treatment. It means that all folks are getting equal access to the opportunities, if we're going to use the equal word. And so it's a very uncomfortable place to be. And I'm really privileged to serve on a team of really smart people who are approaching this problem thoughtfully, and willing to still push back. And even a settled question like this gets brought back up with people saying this still makes me uncomfortable, and then we reprocess it and see if it's a decision that needs to stay made or not. So the equity issue in that, through that lens, is something that's really been on my mind a lot. And Justin, hold on, let me read what you wrote here. You've been thinking about opportunities that gain foothold toward broader. I'm sorry, I should read this in case other people don't see it. At Captain_info, our buddy Justin Mason says he's been thinking about where the opportunities exist for open badges to gain footholds toward broader acceptance. He works in higher ed, so most of his thinking happens in that context. I think that's a really great question that a lot of us in this space are dealing with, right? We still have people who are saying, sounds like a flavor of the week, right? And is this just going to be a fad? Is this going to be one more binder on my shelf? And if so, I don't have free time. I certainly don't have time to invest in something that the wind's going to be blowing in a different direction in a few days, or a few weeks, or even a couple of years, and I'm just, all my energy and effort that I put into this will be for naught. And what I say to that is, I think that we have moved. I really do think the pendulum has swung, and I think we've crossed a threshold to where this is not going to be a flavor of the week. This is going to, it's on a slow and steady march, but it's on a march towards ubiquity. And I don't think it's going back. And I think where that is coming from is the adoption of digital badge credentials in the quote unquote real world. And so, we deal with this, Justin, you're dealing with it in higher ed. I deal with it. Most of my work happens in the K-12 space. And, to be honest, like, a lot of times we have K-12 inventions for the real world that the real world didn't ask for. And right now we're in a situation where actually this is a really real world problem, right? We have employers who have hiring needs, and the existing storytelling mechanisms, the existing levers that we have to pull in order to communicate to those hiring bodies the skills and the achievements and the capacities that we have, are not effective in communicating them in a reliable fashion, right? I can write at the bottom of my resume that I'm great at research, that I'm collaborative, but at the end of the day, that they just have to take my word for it, that that's a skill I put down at the bottom of my resume. It's not verifiable, and it's definitely not verifiable in any meaningful kind of way. And so, I think as HR finds about these, as more and more real world companies start to look to this to say, this is a really expensive problem, because we needed somebody who was collaborative. We needed somebody who was good at research, and we hired this person because they said they were. And now we're finding out, 3 months later, maybe they're an introvert. We're finding out 2 years later, they're not collaborative, and they were toxic. And this is a very expensive problem for our company. And digital badge credentials give us this ability to credential those skills and then communicate them to potential employers with evidence attached, right, in verifiable ways. And so all of a sudden, there is a itch there, and digital badge credentials are one of the right scratches for that itch, I think. And so I really do think they're not going anywhere. And we're finding more and more in the K-12 space, especially, that when we have these conversations with decision makers, who are saying, isn't that kind of just like digital gold stars and stickers? When we're able to say, actually, IBM is using this in a really meaningful way to build this global heat map of talent, such as, that when they have a need come up, they know the skills within their company. And so they can query tens of thousands of employees in a database for who has the right skills for this particular project that comes up in Boise. And then they can cross-reference that with calendars instead of turning to other people in the room and saying, hey, who do we know who would be good for this project? They query a system and find out what the data says on who's going to be good and if they're available, and they form the right team based on the skills that are needed in a way that's completely blind to things like race, gender, and last name. And so I think there's huge implications there for equity and access. And I think that when our stakeholders on the K-12 and higher education side see that and see that happening, and these brand names that they've heard of, like IBM and Salesforce, and not just technology companies, but the National Hardwood Flooring Association, right? Then all of a sudden they start to say, okay, we might be actually creating a disadvantage for our students if we don't go down this path. Um, I think it's okay to share that Aurora actually in the last few weeks has actually been approached by a college who said, "Hey, we think that the essential skills badges in Aurora Public Schools align well with our skills that we think are essential for the students at our college." And we're now engaging with them about maybe even as early as this spring creating a admissions agreement, whether it's an articulation or preferred admissions, where it's still TBD, but basically, students are going to have a competitive advantage to go to one of these colleges just because they have these credentials. And so I think, if and when that comes to pass here in the spring, that's going to be some really compelling kind of narratives, I think, for decision makers to grasp onto and say, you know what, maybe even though we don't totally understand this, maybe it's worth us kind of just going ahead and accepting it and putting our, talented people like Justin Mason in charge and saying, you know what, Justin, just go, make something happen, and then let's learn from it. Let's see what happened. But we don't want to be last in line for this. We want to be first. And Jason, Justin, I think when I look at like this, maybe 8 months ago in May, I think it was, the University of Chicago announced you don't need an SAT or an ACT to apply to the University of Chicago. So that, there's a higher educational institution that clearly is thinking differently about how we assess, whether or not people are bringing to the table what we think they need in order to succeed in our environments. For the folks who just joined during that last question, know that we have 5 minutes left till the top of the hour. Unless everybody leaves the room, I'll continue to riff. If you want to real quick throw a question out to me, tweet at hashtag badge chat, or you could tweet at me and I will answer your question live on the air in those next couple minutes. If you have, Justin, I don't know if you want to follow up on the question you asked, or if you want me to continue going on that, let me know. Otherwise, I will go on to the next thing. And I guess one thing, if you're the type of person who is watching this, do know that you know, Badge Summit is going to organizing a Badge Summit is getting going in earnest here in the next really 2 weeks. And so if you're somebody in the Badge Chat and Badge Summit community who's interested in a leadership opportunity of, helping to put on this amazing conference for our community, reach out to me. Would love to have you involved. You let me know how you'd like to be involved, whether it's helping to evaluate session proposals, whether it's helping with our, inclusion policy that I want to put out there this year, whether it's getting word out to people around um, just promoting it. Any way that you want to be involved as a leader in this community, I want to create that opportunity for you, because this isn't, just me. This is for all of us. And I just happen to pour a whole lot of love into it. And if you want to pour some love into it too, let's cheers, and do so. So this is my ditch that textbook coffee mug, by the way, for any Matt Miller fans out there. We're coming up on the end of the hour, so maybe just out of respect for folks' time, just so I don't go over, I might kind of wrap up here. Let me just real quick check the hashtag, make sure that we don't have any last minute questions. Again, I'm sorry for anybody who watches this on YouTube who was expecting to see an interview. We'll try and get those folks back on another time. I don't know if it was a miscommunication or what, but Rocket Ready, we are not doing that interview this afternoon. So I apologize for that. I hope that this has been helpful to just kind of hear me riff on what's been on my mind. If not, I apologize. Send your hate mail to, you can just go ahead and tweet it out. Shame me in public. That's fine. I'm at Senor G, and I am your humble servant. This is every Monday for Badge Chat. I appreciate you, and hope that you have a badge-worthy week, everybody. Bye-bye.